Well, quite a big difference, eh? Here's that big surprise I was talking about. I got the whole car repainted. I figured now that the swap was done, it should deserve to look a lot nicer. And the closer of course that middle area where the brown paint was pretty bad, but the closer I looked at the white paint, the worse it got, and that was a repaint from probably, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago maybe. So anyway, I got this project pretty much wrapped up now. The only thing I don't have is the speedometer still, but haven't really been in any rush to get that done because I don't have the PCM flash yet for the axle. So I got new bumper fillers for the front of the car. They still make bumper fillers, reproduction bumper fillers of course. They're made out of ABS plastic, so they're not as flexible as the original, which has its pluses and minuses. Overall, I'm pretty happy with the way the car came out paint-wise. It really looks nice. It's got a nice shine to it. And I stripped all the brown paint off the center of the trim and polished it. So that is all the usual wood grain trim, just stripped and polished up. Oh, and you might notice from one of my other videos that these wheels are the wheels that came on my 95 Roadmaster. I was getting used to the way they looked on that car, but I thought they looked a lot nicer on this car. So just a little sort of just a touch of sort of sportiness, as I just didn't feel like white walls were, I wasn't feeling white walls for this car for whatever reason. Just didn't seem to work for me. So I also have new bumper fillers in the rear. These came with the car. These were salvaged. I think they're reproductions, possibly factory reproductions from probably the 90s or something. They're made of that same flexible rubbery stuff. They're in pretty good shape, so they're able to clean them up and sand them up and reuse them. The original ones that were on here were hard as a rock and just totally shot. So overall, very happy with the way the paint came out. Nice and shiny, nice and smooth, no ripples or anything. And this is, it's probably hard to tell in the video, but this is closer to the original color. You know, the car, as I mentioned, had been repainted, and it was repainted a slightly lighter white color. So this is a closer match to the original. I like it better. It's like a cream color, sort of maybe an antique white or something you might call it. So I also had the inside of the door jambs and everything done because mostly on the passenger side there had been some body work on the B-pillar and the paint was peeling. So also the interior here, I got some seats out of a 94 Caprice wagon, because the old ones, well, the original ones were just, the front ones were just destroyed from the Las Vegas sun, and the guy I bought the car from had put in some kind of like late 70s wagon vinyl bench seats that were orange. They were uncomfortable and they looked terrible. I had to add in this seat side mounted control panel, because of course on a 94 would have been on the door, and the LeSabre, you know, the lower model cars always had the power seats in the seat in the 80s, so that works. The front seats are exactly the same as far as bolt pattern goes. They just drop right in, and as a matter of fact, the rails are interchangeable too. So the Caprice I got these seats out of had a power rail, so I swapped this car's original manual rail onto there, no problem. Bolt holes are exactly the same. I would have swapped the power seat assembly because it was all wired with that side seat switch, but it was bad. It was one of those stupid units with one motor and a plastic transmission. But you know, and I think after like 87 or something, they went to 3 motors, which is the way to go. So, being that these seats are from a 94, I had to swap the entire rear carpet. The 77 to 93 seats are all interchangeable in these cars. But the 94 to 96, they changed it to this cheaper, you know, there's no middle filler panel here. I never even vacuumed this. It's got dog hair in it. So I had to put these mounts in here and stuff. This was actually a lot more work than I thought it was going to be. But you take what you can get with red interiors. And these seats are in pretty good shape, and they were $100 for the seats plus the floor, so I thought that was pretty good. So, let's take a look under the hood.
Wait a minute, hold on. Now let's not forget where we came from here. Okay, let's continue.
So everything under the hood is pretty much done. I even got a nice new hood liner. So there she is. Brought 11 years into the future, 1994. So everything under here is pretty much done with the exception of, I'd like to build like a metal sort of air box for this so that this is getting more directly cold air from up front. And I think it'll look a lot nicer, more finished, you know, if it had a box that the air filter went in. Just look nicer. But I tried to make everything look as sort of factory as I could. But that is basically, that's the plan. And now I will go into detail a little bit about what I did to get everything you see here where you see it. So before I drop this thing in here, I changed plugs, wires, cap and rotor. I replaced the valve covers since the old ones were rusty. I got some new ones pretty cheap from Florida in real nice shape. Replaced the water pump since you got to remove it to get to the cap and rotor anyway on the LT1. I also replaced the oil pump and oil pan gasket since you can't do it when it's in the car, so I figured I'd better do it. I also replaced the intake manifold gasket because it was leaking oil out the back, and the belt tensioner. I also deleted the oil cooler because you don't really need it, so people have said, and I couldn't really use the radiator with the built-in oil cooler because it wouldn't clear the fender. I'll get into that later. Let's see. I had to replace the air conditioning compressor. That was shot. And replace the exhaust manifold gaskets. And I had to also replace the passenger side exhaust manifold because some of the bolts broke off on the exhaust flange. And I was going to drill them out, but then I found in Florida I could get a nice clean one for like $12. So that was much easier. I also deleted the air injection emissions system. There was an electric pump that was right over here somewhere, and then there's also a whole bunch of lines that ran around the motor, and you can see those plugs in the manifold. That's where the pipes went into. And even GM found that that system was useless and would disable it for you, so that was a no-brainer. And another thing I did was the coolant bypass mod. The way it was originally set up is this coolant hose here would go through the throttle body to warm it, but supposedly in my part of the country it's not needed, and I'm not driving it in the winter anyway. So rather than the hose going to the throttle body there, it just goes directly to the tank.
So the transmission is also out of the 94. I just changed the filter, and that's really about it. I think it was actually I know it was a rebuild. I have the paperwork on that, so I think it only has about 40 or 50,000 on it. And the drive shaft is from a 91 to 96 B body, since the old one was a little bit too long because of the 204R transmission. I guess that's a shorter tail shaft. The transmission cross member, that's from a 94. The 94 to 96 LT1s were all dual exhaust, so any of those cross members fits right into a car like this. You just have to drill the holes on the passenger side. The holes on the driver's side line up. So it wasn't too bad. A little bit of measuring to figure that out, but I think I got it right. So if we look down here through the grill, we can kind of see the transmission cooler, which is the transmission cooler out of the 94 Roadmaster. one of the lines was rusted, so I had to replace it, but I cut the lines and I brought the cooler up higher than it was because the 94 to 96 B bodies, they put them behind the bumper. It's a pretty, solid cooler, but it needs to be in a location where it's getting better airflow, so I think it should work pretty well now. And while we're down here, let's take a look under the fender behind the bumper here where I put the evap canister. And this is the same location that you'd find it in the 94's frame. I just had drill holes to attach this bracket. Only difference is, of course, the 90s B-bodies had a big plastic shield that prevented it from getting wet. But it's a sealed unit, so it should be alright. So this car has the factory exhaust on my 94. I just painted it with some high temp paint. I was trying to do this on a budget, and the exhaust is stainless steel, so why not reuse it? It's even got cats. And I did have to replace the mufflers because they were kind of rotted. Replace them with Walker sound effects mufflers, which they're just a little bit louder. Eventually at some point I think I will put a custom exhaust on here, but for now, this is just fine. It's dual exhaust, and like I say, it's stainless, so it holds up well. I also had to put a heat shield, if I can sort of see. So I had to put a heat shield, you can see right there, because the brake proportioning valve is awfully close. Now so far it hasn't been a problem. You can see some white pieces of metal. They hold another heat shield, which goes under the driver's side floor, so that you don't heat up your feet. I also put on new O2 sensors, because gosh knows how old the ones that were in there were, and it's a lot easier doing that out of the car. Now for the fuel system, I was able to use the lines from my 94 Roadmaster. They're nylon lines. I just ran them up there because the firewall's, completely different in shape here. It doesn't come out like over the motor as much as it does on the new car, which is nice because it gives you more room to work. So I just had to drill the hole in the frame, which you can kind of see right there. And the fuel tank from the 94 and straps to fit the 94 to 6 bolted right up, no problem. Fuel filters in the same place. So all that stuff went in like it was made to.